The real challenge for boxers isn't to defeat the person they're up against. Rather, the greatness is in the fact that as soon as the bell goes, you put aside your anger and shake the hand of your opponent regardless of the result. Regardless of this requirement, every now and then we see some terrible moments during boxing matches. Today, we'll be revisiting some of the most disgraceful events that occurred in the ring, starting with the fight between James Butler and Richard Grant. James Butler was one of the most promising young fighters of the late 90s. Hailing from New York, he had a nickname, Harlem Hammer, that best described his fighting style. Butler fought Richard Grant in November of 2001 in a charity event benefiting the survivors of 9/11. However, he lost by unanimous decision and made his way to the middle of the ring to congratulate his opponent. Grant stretched his hand out to embrace Butler, and Butler, who had already taken off his gloves, produced a huge haymaker to Grant's face. It was truly disgraceful from the Harlem Hammer, as Grant ended up suffering numerous facial injuries that included a broken jaw, stitches, and a lacerated tongue. Butler, on the other hand, was rightfully arrested and convicted of assault. He served some prison time, and upon his return to the ring, he simply couldn't recapture his earlier success. A few years later, Butler was arrested and charged with the murder of Sam Kellerman, the brother of a boxing analyst. Apparently, he killed him with a hammer and set his body on fire. Yeah, we can't believe it either. Thankfully, he was sentenced to 29 years in prison after pleading guilty in 2006. Next is the Madison Square Garden riot. This is a strange fight. Imagine being on the brink of superstardom and you just throw it all away. And why? Well, you get to decide. Andrew Golota was a Polish-born boxing sensation who had an exceptional 27-0 record. He was coming up against Riddick Bowe, the former undisputed heavyweight champion who had a 38-1 record himself. In the fight, though, Golota was sensational, clobbering the ex-champ in every round, and by the end of the sixth, he was well in control, led on points, and was moments away from scoring a knockout. However, in the seventh round, the fight changed dramatically. Golota, for some unknown reason, started punching Bowe below the belt, and despite several warnings, he didn't stop. This resulted in a disqualification for Golota, and Bowe's corner immediately responded by attacking Golota and his team. That escalated into a full-scale riot, which was racially charged, and the MSG security wasn't equipped to handle the riot. It was finally stopped once the New York police arrived, but not before several fans, boxing personnel, and police were injured in this disgraceful incident. Moving on to Richard Steele destroying the sport. Few fights in the history of boxing have brought as much promise as the one between Julio Cesar Chavez and Meldrick Taylor. Two undefeated champions of the same weight class, both in their primes, were coming up against one another. Chavez had a 68-0 record, and Meldrick Taylor was the welterweight champion and Olympic gold medalist. Chavez was promoted by Don King, the infamous cheat promoter of the late 20th century, but it was Taylor, the underdog, who dominated the fight from the very beginning. As the fight went on, Taylor lost his speed, but he had a huge lead going into the final round. However, late in the final round, Chavez scored a knockdown, but Taylor was on his feet immediately. Yet it was Richard Steele, the referee on the night, who stopped the fight with 2 seconds to go and awarded the fight to Chavez. Despite protests from Taylor's camp, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, another authority whose integrity has been compromised on many occasions, upheld the decision. It was a disgraceful moment in the sport, as Richard Steele, known for favoring King's fighters, tarnished the sport and ruined Taylor's career and health. Then, the Keith Walker incident in the 1988 Olympics in Seoul. Not many people remember this incident from the 1988 Olympics because there was another incident that garnered a lot more attention. We'll look at both, but let's start with the Keith Walker incident. Keith Walker wasn't a boxer. He was a referee from New Zealand officiating a bantamweight fight between home favorite Byun Jong-il and Bulgaria's Alexander Hristov. It was easily the worst fight Walker would have ever officiated because it was filled with ugly play from both sides, but Jong's headbutting was penalized the most because it was just too excessive. By the end of the fight, Hristov was given the win, but Jong's countrymen didn't accept the decision and invaded the ring, attacking Keith Walker with punches, bottles, kicks, and even chairs. The New Zealander barely escaped from the scene and directly made a run for the airport, taking the first flight out of Seoul to New Zealand. It was such a shameful and disgraceful moment that the presidents of the Korean Boxing Federation and the Korean Olympic Committee both ended up resigning. Up next, Roy Jones Jr. robbery. The 1988 Olympics were one of the worst ones ever held. We've already discussed the Keith Walker incident, and now we'll be moving on to the infamous Roy Jones robbery. Roy Jones Jr. was easily one of the most successful boxers of his generation, as he went for the gold medal at the Olympics. Representing the U.S., he was the obvious favorite, but somehow Jones lost in devastating fashion. After a brilliant run that included multiple unanimous decisions, Jones was in the final against South Korean Park Se-hoon, who'd gotten there with some questionable decisions. In fact, his win against his Italian opponent, Vincenzo Nardiello, could easily make the list because of the blatant cheating done by the South Korean officials. But if there was some sort of cheating in the Nardiello Si-Hoon fight, wait till you hear about the gold medal match. Jones dominated the fight and landed 86 punches to Park's 32, and NBC's punch records had scores of 20-3, 30-15, and 36-14 for Jones, but the judges made a split 3-2 decision in favor of Park as he won the gold medal. In fact, over the years, Park has revealed that he was embarrassed by the decision, and when you look back at his reaction to the fight, you can see he was shocked by the referee too. Next entry, Panama Lewis disgusting actions. Panama Lewis was known for his superb trainer techniques, but at the same time, he was notorious for being a terrible character. Panama was the kind of person who'd go to unspeakable lengths to ensure his boxers win, and that wasn't always okay, as we'll see. Before this incident, he was already under suspicion for giving illegal stimulants to his boxers during the fights and also for gambling in fights that he was involved in, but this one was the worst, even by his own standards. Billy Collins Jr. was an undefeated rising star, and he was set to take on Panama's fighter, Luis Resto, who was nothing but a journeyman with a poor career record. Panama knew that the odds were against his fighter, so he removed the padding from Resto's gloves and added an illegal hardening agent on his wraps. We don't need to tell you that this is perhaps the worst thing you can do as a fighter. Resto would go on to destroy his unsuspecting opponent for 10 rounds, and after being declared the winner, Collins' father touched Resto's hands as he was already suspicious. His fears came true and he immediately reported the officials. Resto's gloves and wraps were confiscated, and both Panama and Resto had their licenses permanently revoked and were sent to jail. Billy Collins Jr. would never fight again as a result of the injuries he received on that night and committed suicide a year later, ending with the tragic death of Duk Koo Kim. Duk Koo Kim was a superstar in South Korea and became the #1 lightweight contender, earning his shot at the world title against Ray Mancini in 1982. It was one of the most brutal fights in recorded history. Mancini absolutely destroyed his opponent and kept on smashing Kim for 13 rounds with tremendous power, but Kim simply wouldn't give up. By the 14th round, Mancini was in cruise control, but his strength didn't waver as he landed a crushing right hand that caused Kim to fly towards the ropes and hit his head on the canvas. Kim managed to rise, but the referee stopped the fight, and minutes later, the South Korean star collapsed into a coma. He was taken to the hospital where he slipped into a coma, only to die 4 days later due to severe brain trauma. It was a tragic death for a promising fighter, and it had a huge effect on Mancini and Richard Green, the bout's referee. Mancini was never the same fighter again, struggling in the fights that followed and blamed himself for Kim's death, while Kim's mother and Green, the referee, both committed suicide shortly after the fight. That's a wrap for this video. Which of these disgraceful moments stands out the most for you? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.